Janis Norton is the general manager at the Urban Farm, where she manages several major projects, including their fruit tree education program, the Urban Farm podcast, and the permaculture design course, as well as their online educational classes, chats, and summits. She earned her degree in sustainability from Arizona State University, became a master gardener, and then took her permaculture design course training in Phoenix. While Greg is the visionary at the Urban Farm, Janis is the implementer, using her superpowers as a project manager to make things happen and keep them on track. In today's presentation, Janis shares how over a 3-year span, she turned her backyard from bare dirt to a thriving desert orchard and garden by building a thick layer of woody mulch and then covering the ground with sweet potatoes and cowpeas as cover crops. Wait till you see the transformation. Welcome, Janis. Thank you for being here today and sharing about the transformation of your backyard.
Well, I appreciate that, especially since I've been with you all week.
Oh, there you go. One of the things I love about this project that you did, you started with, and you're going to show pictures of this, but you started with a blank dirt backyard that had water running off of it. And you've transformed it in a mere 5-6 years into what we're looking at behind you. So that's just amazing.
Well, the timing on it was really kind of funny because my husband and I decided to move in the middle of my senior year of college. Going back to college as an adult was challenging enough. And then we threw in moving a house we had lived in for 20 years into it. And we bought a property that was barren. I mean, from the ground up, we were starting. And it reminded me of some very key elements that I needed to know for this. But the end result was I had a property that was starting from scratch and had no water harvesting planning at all. And I was able to create something I really enjoyed.
Well, and you've done something unique in that you, rather than planting a lot of like vegetable gardens, you planted a lot of fruit trees. So you really created a backyard orchard that is amazing.
I did. Well, because I work with you on the projects that we do and our seed project, I am a very full-time person and I don't have the time to spend doing a lot of little projects around the house. And I wanted to make something that was going to work for me. Mm-hmm. And orchard was really what I needed. I needed the microclimate in my backyard to make myself feel good about my new home.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And what do your neighbors think about this?
They're amazed. I share food with that. In fact, I just brought over a bunch of grapes to my neighbors and they are, they all pile up and get around the table. Grapes, zucchinis from the little garden I have, apples, peaches, plums. They're all really enjoying the sharing of the harvest.
Nice. So everybody just take note at the picture behind her right now. And in about 15 seconds, you're going to see what it looked like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So let's jump in. Yeah.
All right. My talk today is going to be on passive water harvesting or wood chip mulch. Now, my property that we had gave me the challenge in the fact that there were limitations to how much water my property would take. And I needed to find a way to store water for my plant life. The introduction to my yard is basically this. My husband and I bought a new home in March 2016. We were downsizing into a property that we could manage. And we were the first owner to this property. We were up in the northern end of the valley. There was no yard life. There was nothing living on this soil. I don't even think there were bugs in the soil very much. It was desert soil. It was barren, not a weed in sight. And we were faced with a lot of potential for flooding because when you have a new community being built, they bring these machines in that compact the soil, but compacted, dry desert soil does not absorb water. Water just runs off of it. So I wanted to make something that was going to work for me and my yard. The solution was organic matter. I knew that I needed to bring some organic matter in. Fortunately, I had Greg to brainstorm with a lot during this process, and that really helped. So the solution was mulch, just organic mulch. And I ended up bringing in 2 great big loads of chopped up trees that had been brought down by one of the neighborhood landscapers. They brought them in, they dropped it down in front of my yard. They looked like this. This picture is actually after we had been working on the pile for a little bit, but I got 2 big loads like this to put in my backyard to start with. When you are talking about water harvesting, let's start thinking about some numbers. The water harvesting capacity in my space, the backyard was 2,400 square feet. Kind of typical, maybe a little bit on the larger side for some of the neighborhood houses, but that's what I had. My watershed, the roof that led into the backyard, was 1,350 square feet. That was the part of the roof that directly drained into the backyard. Now, from that math, I figured out that I had 3,750 or 3,750 square feet of rainwater harvesting area. I already knew that I did not want to have storage tanks because I didn't feel like I had the space to give that up for what I wanted to create in my yard. I knew that whatever I was going to do was including the water from the house and the water that went on the yard. When you start doing the calculations on that, the harvesting area of 3,750, and you do the math of the standard calculation of 0.6 times, that's how many gallons a square foot will collect in an inch of rainfall. Do the math. That adds up to 2,250 gallons per inch of rainfall. In the desert, we don't get a lot at one time, or we don't get a lot all year long. We get it in bunches of water. Sometimes we'll get it all in one time, and then we'll maybe get a couple inches. But I was not going to be prepared to have any kind of storage container that would hold 2,000 gallons of water. I needed to come up with a different solution. Soil is really a key element in my space because my soil was not ready to absorb 2,250 gallons of water in a 1-inch event. When I went and did some research, and this was the most current research here, 2,250 gallons per inch of rain. And this grid here is the last few years of rain in the northern valley that we have, the northern area of our valley, with an average of 9.68 inches annually. Now, some of you out there might be knowing that's what you get in a week or less, but in Phoenix, that could be an annual, yearly amount of rain. Every crucial drop that I could put and store in my ground would be important. But that meant that my annual average potential was 21,000, just shy of 22,000 gallons of water. There's no way my soil was ready for that. So going back to my yard, adding mulch was the key. We started putting it in, bringing it in wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow, just dropping it in the bag, spreading it out. I, with the help of my husband and my son, ended up putting anywhere from 6 inches to a little more than a foot of woody mulch in this backyard space, laying it out. We brought it in from the 2 dumps. We brought it in from just buying wood chips by themselves and any other way that I can get it. The wonderful thing that I realized was that right off the bat, the very first benefit of this was the dust was eliminated. There was so much dust that was being brought into my house, and that was eliminated as soon as the yard was filled with mulch. So we kept going and going. And believe me, it took a little while for my husband and I to do this. We're both full-time workers at the time. But with this 6 to 12 inches thick across the entire yard, it was fabulous. And the first rain of the season came in and the water was gone. I mean, I didn't see it within 15 to 20 minutes. My next door neighbors, just on the other side of this picture up here on the right, did not have anything in their landscaping, and water that sat in their yard sat for 4 days. This was going to be a key factor later on, but I didn't realize how impactful that was going to be on me at this point. So here we are, we're starting the first element of creating soil in my backyard as opposed to dirt. Creating soil and watching it grow takes a lot of patience. And I was kind of getting tired of looking at wood chips. So we started pulling it back. And you can see over here on the picture that this wood chips were deep. I wasn't kidding about having 6 to 12 inches deep. But we pulled it back. We put some reclaimed bricks in, put a couple of gardens to get started, and I kind of worked with that. Eventually, I wanted trees. So I ordered them. I ordered apples and plums and peaches and apricots and grapes and mulberries and a fig. And that's what I wanted to start with. And I ended up having, I think, 16 trees to start with. But that meant digging. And digging was going to be a big, big challenge in my space because we had a lot of old river rock in the ground. We had caliche, which is a calcium-based natural concrete that was formed in the soil from years and years and years of water working its way through the soil, decades, thousands of years. And that was a challenge, but we started digging the holes for the trees. I was so excited. I've got my husband, my best friend there, digging these holes, getting me ready for this orchard that I had planned. 6 months in, the holes were dug. They were backfilled with soil and starter amendments to get that ecosystem going, which was really important to me at that point because there had not been any decent life in the soil for so long. But after good rain, the soil was dark. This was exciting. Then we planted the trees. We planted almost all the trees in one day, and it rained that night. I was really, really excited. But later on that evening, I went back outside to see how it was looking, and I realized I had a major issue with drainage. And I had learned a lesson because I needed to observe what was happening. This hole here, you can see by the pair of gloves right up there, was actually one of my smaller holes. This is the next day after the rain. And what should happen when you do a percolation test is that the water should drain out in 30 minutes, half hour, 3 hours, 4 hours, something like that. My predicament was that I had that level of water 4 days later. Immediately, I recognized a problem. We pulled the trees out. We started to work on this from a different angle. My big lesson, don't skip that percolation test. I mean, I knew better and I still skipped it because I thought I was in a hurry to get my trees on the ground. My neighbor's drainage problem of the water not soaking into the soil had been hidden because I had all the wood chips. I didn't see the problem, but it was still there. Now, the whole story of how I dealt with that is in my story at urbanfarm.org/mudbath. I encourage you to take a moment, go check it out. It's kind of fun. Got a little series going there. It's probably time for me to put the next one in. But I ended up pulling all the trees out and storing them for a while. The goal was to change the whole makeup of the back part of my yard. We put up a wall that was 4 or 5 bricks high there. We brought in organic matter. I put some of the clay soil up against the wall so it would stay, and I brought in a bunch of new soil. I brought in truckload and truckload of soil, and we even brought in a motorized tiller to mix it in together. We had compost, we had topsoil, we had lots of different organic material. We had taken the wood chips out because I didn't want to bury those, but I was putting in all of new organic material into the soil to get it started. And I ended up elevating that back section of my yard a good 18 to 24 inches, I think, maybe a little more. I didn't measure. So finally, after a while, we got the trees in, and I chose to wait until the next winter to do this. And we planted the trees, and I had nice 6-foot berms around the 6-foot wide basins with berms around each tree, filled those in with wood chips, had them all identified, and thought I was done. But I ended up bringing in more wood chips. I also added some grapes, and this is my grape trellis here, which was strategically placed to protect the trunks of the trees. And I was really quite excited. Now, this picture, when I first added this picture to my presentation here, I hadn't realized one thing that was really cool. This little mound, I say little, it's funny, is the size of this pot. And that was just wood chips that was left over because everything else, that pot could have been put in the ground, and that pot would have been 6 to 12 inches. And then above that, I had all of this other mulch. I was truly trying to create a very dense mat of wood chips. And a few years later, the impact on the soil is crazy. Now, the proof that this system was working came to me pretty quickly. By year 2, the rains were soaked up. We had a single rain event, maybe just about 2 hours. We had 3 inches of rain. It filled my backyard. And these are my young trees here. It filled my backyard. There was a little lake of wood chips. But half an hour later, the lake was gone. And I could walk on this. I chose very gingerly to do that because I didn't want to compact anything. But I could walk on this, and between the soil underneath the wood chips that had already been started and the wood chips, all the water was retained in my yard and none of it left the property. So that was, here we are. We have a 3,750 square feet at a 6-inch rain event. I had 2 3/4 inches. So in that single event, I had 6,187.5 gallons arriving in my backyard, and it was all absorbed within 20 minutes. That was pretty cool. I totally sold my husband. My husband loves talking about that story to his friends. So this was really the confirmation that I was doing what I needed to do. If you look at this and realize what I was doing was planting the water. I was keeping the water in my soil. I did not have any storage containers that I was dealing with to try and drain. I needed to have it all in my soil, but I was also trying to create a blanket ecosystem that I could plant in every space. So that was what I was able to do.
Hey, Janis.
Hey, Greg.
How does that compare to your next door neighbor's yard?
Well, my next door neighbors, I had one that was to my east, a little bit higher than me. The water would run off of their grass area, off of their tree area, and go through the wall into my space. So technically, I actually had more than that 6,000 because I was getting rain that would come through from my neighbor next to me. The neighbor on the slightly lower side of the slope, that rain again stayed for 4 days or longer. I lost track. I got too busy taking care of other things, where the rain that stayed in a low spot just did not get absorbed. All of the houses in the neighborhood were graded by the developer to have the water run out as much as possible off the property into the street. I had already rectified that and I wasn't losing any.
Nice.
So the next season, I had my trees growing. Here is my mulberry, my absolute favorite tree in the yard. This is a weeping Santa Rosa, very happy. This is an apple. There are wood chips everywhere. Everywhere you go in my yard, there were wood chips as was growing. And one of the things that I did on top of that, because we live in the desert, I added ground cover on top of the wood chips. And we did this mostly with sweet potatoes and somewhat with cowpeas. And this is my section of trees. You saw this picture earlier. There's 3 trees here and 3 trees here. And the entire space in between was covered with sweet potatoes. Interestingly, I did an experiment where I had half of my orchard had planted the sweet potatoes and half of my orchard, I had planted the cowpeas. Now, sweet potatoes came up first and they blanketed really well. The cowpeas came up later. I didn't have as much success with the cowpeas in that section. And to this day, the part of the yard that had the sweet potatoes and had the bigger, more lusher ground cover of green on top of the wood chips was definitely the cooler, more productive zone of my yard. This is my friend Ray. He's actually helping me try and harvest some stuff, but he got lost in it. He's kneeling there, but he's lost in my sweet potatoes. And this is just a few months change. Here we are with, this is in the spring, the early spring before the sweet potatoes had kicked in. This is looking from the west side of my orchard, looking due east, and just a few months the sweet potatoes started to cover in. The trees were a lot happier and you can barely see the path through there.
And how many years into this project is this?
This is year 3.
Wow.
This is year 3.
You went from a dirt barren backyard to this in 3 years.
Yeah, I know, right?
In the desert.
In the desert.
Wow.
Yeah, it was truly amazing to watch. Unfortunately, I'm allergic to citrus, so I don't have any citrus trees in my yard. These are all deciduous. So the wintertime they go bare And then in the spring, they pop up with green, and it is so exciting to see this happen. And I had other green. This is an artichoke plant that just exploded. Like, you see how happy this artichoke plant was? I had so many artichokes on that plant that year based on where it was and everything. And then I have my grapevines. This is a picture where you can just kind of start seeing some of the grapes that were popping up. My grapevines are so prolific because of the way I water. So here again, this barren desert backyard, the ground had been raised, it had been leveled, it had been super compacted with construction. All of the topsoil in my half of the street had been taken off and moved to the other side of the street just to help elevate their side. So the property had no plant life. It had no topsoil. It had no health. And here's a picture 3 years in with just luscious green growth and excitement, and plants just super happy and starting wherever they wanted.
Nice.
And this is 5 years in. This is my grapevines that we had. You can see some neighborhood trees behind us, but then I got my plum trees and my peach trees, and it's just fun. And this section right here, I turned into a pollinator garden. I keep adding flowers every year to make sure that I've got flowers to bring the birds and the bees into. Here we go. Another beautiful picture with some of my apples that I harvested, looking back into the forest with some flowers that I've got underneath my trees, and a visitor and that's one thing. I have such wildlife. I have birds and lizards. I have so many lizards, and I literally have quail nesting in my yard right now and other things. It's just a fun place to be.
And those are apples on the right.
This is one of my apples. This is my first really big, at that time, harvest of Dorset golden apples. Since that time, now I can get four of those buckets. And I really do keep my trees kind of small because it's just me and my husband and whatever I can pawn off to my neighbors. That is my yard.
Excellent.
Thank you.